Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot into a quiet scholar's room in Old Korea, sometime during the late Joseon dynasty. The air outside is brittle and cold. Winter has pressed its fingers against every stone, roof tile, and jar of pickled cabbage. But inside this modest home, the walls breathe warmth, the floors glow from below, and somewhere in the distance, a kettle sighs. You're lying on a firm mat, wrapped in a thin cotton blanket that smells faintly of ash and ink. The roof creaks now and then like an old man stretching. The paper windows are frosted over, softening the morning light into pale gray brushstrokes. You blink, and for a moment, you're not quite sure if you're awake or dreaming. That's the magic of this place. A scholar's life might sound noble and enlightened on paper, but in real time, it's mostly cold feet, smoky soup, and memorizing Confucius by candlelight. And if you're not careful, you'll forget to open the flue before starting the morning fire and slowly smoke yourself out before your first cup of barley tea. Yes, you probably wouldn't survive this, but that's half the fun, isn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere chilly or somewhere warm where you'd like it to be chilly, leave a comment with your location and the local time. I'd love to know who's tuning in from the future or from under 10 blankets. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift under the blanket and listen to the quiet. A rooster calls in the distance, but nobody here is rushing. Scholars in this village rise with discipline, but never with urgency. You're not just visiting a home, you're inhabiting a rhythm, and it begins beneath your feet. The stone fog. Lore feels almost alive. Not hot, not cold, just right. The kind of warmth that sneaks into your bones without ever announcing itself. It's the kind of heat that feels earned. Not button-pushed, not central, not instant. No radiators, no thermostats. Just a low, slow heat that has traveled through stone and soot to reach you. This is no accident. The warmth below you comes from the Ondol, a word that literally means warm stone. You're about to spend your day discovering how this ingenious invention, thousands of years old, shaped not just Korea's architecture, but its very way of living, thinking, and sitting. But before any of that, you need to get up. And that, as it turns out, is the hardest part of the day. The mat is warm, the floor is warmer, the air above, utterly freezing. The second you poke a hand out of the blanket, your skin regrets its boldness. You finally force yourself upright and pad across the room in woolen socks that have seen better centuries. The floor keeps your feet from going numb. As you reach for a small, folded tunic, you realize the clothing was left too close to the wall. It's crisp with cold. You shake it out, and a puff of soot-colored dust dances in the light. Through the rice paper doors, you hear the gentle click of wood on wood as someone prepares breakfast. Likely a grandmother, maybe a servant, maybe someone who's been up for hours making sure your floor was warm before you even woke. That's the unsung beauty of this world. Heat is effort, and someone always pays the price. You peek through a slit in the paper wall. Outside, a thin curl of smoke rises from the kitchen chimney. Not high or dramatic, just a quiet suggestion that life is stirring. That smoke has already traveled underneath your floor before ever reaching the sky. It has done double duty, cooked rice, warmed bones, and is only now being released. You step carefully. Down the hall, the outer corridor is unheated, and your feet feel the difference immediately. It's like walking across the memory of winter itself. You can hear a child coughing in another room, a brush scratching ink on paper, and from far off, a dog barking in a tone that clearly suggests it's just doing it out of obligation. You arrive at the front room, where slippers have been arranged with monk-like precision. You sit, stretch your legs, and glance around. The home is modest, almost bare, but not Spartan. Every object has a purpose. There's a low table with scrolls rolled tight, a stack of firewood in the corner, a paper fan painted with cranes. Your host, an older man in plain robes, enters and bows slightly. His eyes are kind, but also very tired. He's been living this life for decades, and his floor has probably heard more poetry than most libraries. He gestures for you to sit again, and so you return to the floor. Sitting on a heated floor is different. It changes your posture, your attitude. There's a reason Korean scholars prized it. The warmth rises up into your hips, your spine, your thoughts. You feel grounded, seated, humble, ready to learn something you didn't know you were missing. The scholar picks up a scroll, opens it with a flick of his wrist, and begins reading aloud. His voice is low and steady, like a cat purring from another room. You catch only fragments, mentions of heaven, virtue, filial piety. You nod as if you understand, and he nods back, as if he believes you. In truth, you're thinking mostly about how brilliant this heating system is. The idea that smoke, dangerous, smelly, unruly smoke, could be channeled into something gentle, helpful, even cozy. It feels like magic, like alchemy. But really, it's just good engineering. And necessity, of course. Winter in Korea is not known for its mercy. Your host closes the scroll. The kettle whistles softly. A child enters and bows deeply before sliding a tray toward you. Barley tea, rice porridge, pickled radish. Simple, warm, and made more delicious by the heat still radiating up through the table's legs. You eat in silence, grateful. The scholar does the same, and outside the day begins without ceremony. There's no alarm clock, just smoke, warmth, and the slow discipline of centuries. You've finished your tea now, but you stay seated. Not because you're especially sleepy, though you are, or particularly fond of fermented radish, though it's grown on you. You stay seated because the floor is still warm. Consistently, lovingly, stubbornly warm. Like it's trying to convince you not to go outside. And honestly, you're convinced. You press your palms to the ground, then your fingertips, feeling how the heat pulses in quiet waves across the stone. This isn't a blanket of warmth. It's more like a quiet conversation between fire and stone, whispered beneath your body. You scoot slightly, testing where the warmth fades and where it blooms stronger. You find the hottest spot under your right heel. A little surprise, like a leftover ember buried deep. You can almost picture it, the little soot-black tunnel stretching beneath you, filled with the last breath of yesterday's fire. No heating vents, no roaring flames, no thermostats ticking on and off like impatient machines. Just you, the earth, and smoke that knows exactly where to go. You finally stand, slowly, carefully. The room is unhurried and expects the same from you. You're headed toward the kitchen, where, according to the scholar, you'll meet the source of this sorcery. Or, well, his mother-in-law, which may be the same thing. As you make your way down the corridor again, your feet feel the small shifts in temperature. One room still carries yesterday's fire. Another has cooled, awaiting the next mealtime. It's not uniform, but it's not chaos either. It's a kind of slow, respectful balance, like the house is remembering what warmth is, even as it loses it. You enter the kitchen. Immediately your nose is full of smoke and vinegar and burnt rice crust, something Koreans call nurungji, and which, you are assured, is absolutely the best part. You are less convinced, but politely intrigued. A woman is hunched over the agunji, the kitchen hearth. She glances up and gives you the briefest nod before returning to her work. Her hair is pulled back with a scarf stained by decades of steam. Her sleeves are rolled, her posture shaped by generations of early mornings. She is not here for small talk. You watch as she feeds thin sticks into a blackened opening at the base of the clay stove. Not logs, nothing dramatic, just dry twigs, collected with quiet patience. The fire doesn't roar. It hums, flickers, purrs. You crouch beside her. She gestures to the stovetop, 3 wide, flat spaces where pots sit like ancient cauldrons. One is already bubbling, the others wait. But what you're really watching is below. The small firebox, what they call the budumak, feeds not just these pots, but the long hollow passages that run beneath the floor of the next room. This is the gorai, the stone flue. The fire's breath travels through it before escaping through the chimney, which always sits at the far end of the house. It's not random. It's designed. Every bit of smoke has a purpose. Every tunnel was carved with warmth in mind. The woman stirs a pot, then gently pokes at the fire. The wood shifts, and a single trail of smoke disappears down the tunnel like a lazy snake. You learn quickly that the kitchen is the furnace. Every meal fuels the floor. Every stew simmers while also heating the stone beds of the people beyond. This is how the Ondol system works. Not with metal, not with radiators, but with flow. Smoke flows, heat flows, meals and warmth arrive together. And suddenly it clicks. The floor wasn't heated for you. It was heated because Mion wanted breakfast. You were just lucky enough to be downstream from a good soup. It's ingenious, sustainable, cozy, a little smoky, sure, but clever in a way that makes modern technology feel unnecessarily complicated. No electricity, no circuit boards, just physics, stones, and an understanding of how heat wants to move. You reach out toward the flue opening where the smoke disappears. You don't touch it, obviously, you weren't raised in a forest, but you feel the heat rise from it in waves. There's a faint smell of soot and ash, but also of comfort, as if this particular combination of smells has lulled 1,000 generations into 1,000 naps. You ask how often the fire is lit. The woman shrugs. Every day, she says. Sometimes twice, if it's bitter. Then she points toward the ceiling. But you always check the flue first. If it's clogged, she trails off and simply makes a choking gesture. You nod solemnly. Noted. Historians still argue whether these Ondol systems were totally safe. Some claim they were marvels of design, with airflow so perfect it prevented backdrafts and gas buildup. Others suggest that, yes, more than a few folks probably succumbed to an enthusiastic fire and a closed chimney flap. But the truth likely lies in the middle. Like most long-lived technologies, the Ondol system was as safe as the person using it. You step outside for a moment. The chimney, unassuming, slightly crooked, pokes out of the far side of the house like a forgotten teapot spout. Smoke drifts lazily from its top. It doesn't billow. It doesn't rage. It simply escapes. You imagine the path it's taken, curling through the stone flues, warming each room, kissing the feet of a small child still asleep in the corner room, slipping past the sleeping mat of the grandmother who always sleeps closest to the heat. Then, finally, climbing skyward, tired but fulfilled. You walk back in and pass through another room. This one's cooled slightly since breakfast. The heat has faded but not disappeared. It lingers in the stones like an old friend who doesn't know when to leave. You sit down, cross-legged, and feel the warmth shift beneath you, soft, subtle, real. You imagine living like this full-time. No buttons, no buzzing vents, just one fire to cook, to heat, to hold the whole household together. It's not flashy, but it's enough. And somehow, in that quiet enoughness, it becomes kind of beautiful. You're still sitting there, in that middle room with the slightly cooled floor, when the builder arrives. He's not what you expect. Not a burly man with soot on his hands and gravel in his voice. No, this man is slight. His beard is neat. His robes are clean. He walks in as if he's about to teach a class, not construct a fireplace. He greets you with a nod, then sets down a narrow wooden box filled with folded diagrams, twine, and what appears to be a bundle of small sticks tied with a ribbon. It's not long before you realize, this isn't just a man who builds homes. This is someone who builds meaning into homes. You follow him out back, where a half-finished hut sits waiting. Clay walls rise up in a lopsided rectangle. Wooden beams stretch awkwardly like elbows caught mid-dance. The roof isn't on yet, and everything smells of wet straw and ambition. This, he says, will be another scholar's house. You raise your eyebrows. It doesn't look very scholarly. He chuckles and hands you a trowel. Today, he says, you're helping build an Ondol from scratch. You'd laugh if he didn't look so serious, but he's already kneeling and mixing clay in a low stone trough. The mix is simple: local dirt, water, chopped straw, and sometimes a bit of ash. It's not flashy, but it sticks, like the world's first DIY concrete. You join him, awkwardly at first, mirroring the mixture across a flat stone slab, the base of the floor. This is where it begins. As you work, he explains, the key to an ondol is not just the firebox or the chimney. It's the gore, the horizontal flue tunnels. These must be laid just right, too narrow and the smoke gets stuck, too wide and the heat races through without touching the stones. He pulls out the bundle of sticks, actually small measuring tools, hand-carved generations ago, and begins marking the layout. It's like watching someone lay down a melody you can't hear yet, a network of tunnels that will soon carry warmth like blood in veins. You crouch lower and trace the lines with your fingers, trying to imagine the invisible current that will run through them. Next come the flat stones, seokban. These are laid over the flues to form the floor's base. Each one is placed with care. Not one is identical, but together they form a mosaic of heat and strength. You set one down yourself, feeling its weight, its roughness. A piece of mountain now destined to warm someone's toes. The builder smiles. These stones will outlive all of us, he says. You nod. You believe him. Once the stones are in place, he spreads another thin layer of clay over them, this time mixed with crushed pottery shards. This top layer is meant to catch and hold the heat. It's the thermal memory of the entire system. Warm it once, and it will remember that warmth for hours. As he works, he shares an old saying. The floor remembers the fire, even after the smoke forgets. You pause. That's beautiful, and probably embroidered on 100 tourist pillows now. But in this context, it feels profound. A few chickens wander past, completely unimpressed by your historical revelations. You shoo them gently and watch as the final flue cap is placed. It's a simple thing, a small trap door that allows access in case of clogs. You're too old to check it monthly, or risk waking up with a cough in a room full of regrets. You stand back. The ondol is almost done. Tomorrow, they'll seal it with polished clay. Then it will cure for several days before the first fire is lit. The builder explains that starting the first fire is a sacred act. Too hot, and the clay cracks. Too cold, and the floor remains lifeless. He says some families whisper wishes into the first flame. Some place rice grains at the flue's mouth. A few even sing. It's not superstition, he insists. It's habit, ritual, an agreement between the home and the people who live in it. You wipe your hands and look around. This little house now has bones, a way to breathe, a belly for fire. It's still open to the sky, but somehow it already feels warmer. You walk back to your host's home with your legs sore and your shoes full of straw. As you sit on the now slightly cooler floor, you find yourself thinking about what went into it, the layers, the planning, the invisible network of choices that delivered that one patch of warmth under your heel. Modern builders might scoff. They have insulation, HVAC, smart thermostats, but the ondol doesn't need to be smart. It is smart, in its simplicity, in its patience, in its deep, stone-slow understanding of how warmth works. Historians still debate who perfected this system. Some say it was borrowed from Chinese kang beds, long-heated platforms used in the northern plains. Others argue the ondol developed independently, shaped by Korea's harsh winters and mountainous terrain. There are even archaeological remains from 2,000 years ago showing similar structures. And yet, no two ondol systems are exactly alike. Each region adapted its own twist. Each family found its own rhythm. That's the beauty of it, the builder tells you as you sip water from a shallow clay bowl. The ondol isn't a machine, it's a conversation between fire, earth, and daily life. You think back to this morning, when you barely wanted to leave the floor. Now you understand why. It's not just heat, it's comfort with roots. It's the glow of yesterday's dinner keeping you warm at midnight. It's the trace of flame remembered in stone. You lie down again, stretching your back across the floor, and smile. Warm stone, cold air, clay on your sleeves. Somehow, everything feels just right. The floor hums softly beneath you, like a sleepy animal. You stretch your legs and feel the familiar, pleasant heat rise into your calves. It's a quiet reminder. You're not alone. Somewhere, the fire has already done its job, winding through its stone labyrinth beneath you, brushing heat against the soles of this home. Now you're finally ready to meet the hero behind the warmth, the Ondol itself. Not just the physical stones and smoke tunnels, but the entire system. A masterpiece of low-tech engineering and high-comfort living. The scholar joins you, brushing imaginary dust off his sleeves. He's clearly excited, though in the dignified way of a man whose idea of a wild time is retranslating Mencius. He motions for you to follow him. You do. Of course you do. The man practically glides on these heated floors. He leads you out to a diagram pinned up on a wooden board near the courtyard. It's drawn in delicate ink, cross-sections of homes, flue angles, tunnel paths. The Ondol laid bare. You half expect a little cartoon fire labeled, "This Guy." The scholar taps the illustration with a thin stick. Fire begins here, he says, pointing to the agunjai, the kitchen hearth you saw earlier. But warmth, that's a journey. You lean in. The system is deceptively simple. A small fire built in the kitchen passes its smoke and heat through a series of low horizontal tunnels under the living quarters. The floor above these flues is made of flat stone, covered in thick clay, and finally, in most homes, a layer of oiled paper or woven mats. The smoke doesn't rise. It travels horizontally, slowly, stubbornly, before escaping out a chimney far on the other side of the house. In doing so, it warms everything above it. By the time it leaves the building, it's cool, harmless, and done with its duties. You live on the exhaust, the scholar says, almost cheerfully. You can't help but laugh. It's true. This floor is warmed not by a primary fire, but by its leftovers, its afterthoughts. And yet, the result feels intimate, not industrial. The best part? It doesn't just heat the room, it heats you. Not the air, not some distant ceiling space, but the exact place where your spine meets the ground. No wonder Koreans traditionally sat, slept, ate, studied, and meditated on the floor. It's the warmest seat in the house, because it is the house. And unlike Western systems that blow hot air into the room like a leaf blower in a sauna, the Ondol is patient. It doesn't blast, it lingers. Heat builds gradually, gently. It's not a firework, it's a sunrise. The scholar points to another feature you hadn't noticed. Slight upward slopes in the floor. The flue channels are angled, just subtly enough, to guide the smoke along its path. If it were flat, the smoke might dawdle, stagnate, or worse, seep back into the rooms. You crouch to get a better look at the floor. Sure enough, you feel the faintest tilt beneath your knees. It's intentional. The whole system is tuned, like an instrument made of stone and soot. It's almost elegant, a kind of heated haiku. You ask about maintenance. Surely something this old needs upkeep. He nods. Chimneys must be cleared regularly. Clay may crack in extreme cold. Some families install inspection holes into the flue to check for soot buildup or small animal stowaways. Yes, there are tales of startled cats leaping from chimney vents. And no, nobody ever blames the cat. The scholar tells you a story. Once, a nobleman tried to improve his Ondol system by adding extra fireboxes. The result? The house was so hot the ink melted off his books. Another time, a lazy official blocked his flue midwinter to conserve firewood and nearly asphyxiated half the household. Lesson? Warmth is wonderful, but respect the smoke. Historians still argue whether the Ondol system began as a deliberate invention or an accidental innovation. One theory suggests it evolved from outdoor kilns, where heated pottery was placed atop stone chambers. Another claims early tombs had similar smoke-channeling designs, hinting that the dead were the first to enjoy a good heated floor. Either way, by the early Joseon dynasty, Ondol systems were standard in most Korean homes, from rustic village huts to noble estates. Over time, they became more refined. Better flue angles, smoother floors, even adjustable vents for temperature control. Yes, the past had climate zones, just very, very slowly activated ones. You ask if it ever went out of fashion. The scholar shakes his head. Never. Even during Japanese occupation and industrialization, Koreans held on to their ondol. It wasn't just about heat, it was about identity. The floor was a place of learning, eating, sharing. It was where families gathered, where ancestors were remembered, where tea was poured without rushing. You nod. You get it now. This isn't a heating system. It's a philosophy, a way of living from the ground up. And just as you're about to express your admiration with something profound and dignified, your stomach betrays you with a growl loud enough to echo down the hallway. The scholar raises an eyebrow. I see the ondol has stimulated your appetite. You smile sheepishly. Maybe it's the warmth, maybe it's the barley tea, or maybe it's just that the floor has been gently cooking your legs for the last hour like a very patient boast. Either way, lunch is sounding fantastic right now. You shuffle back toward the dining room, or at least the room where eating happens. There's no formal dining table, just a low wooden tray set in the center of the floor, surrounded by thin cushions that have clearly witnessed many meals and a few spilled stews. And of course, the floor is still warm. Gloriously, steadily warm. It's a cozy little conspiracy. The fire lit for cooking lunch has already snaked its way beneath this room, preheating your sitting spot like a whispered promise of rest. The meal arrives carried by the same woman who handled the hearth earlier, her expression still composed but now softened slightly by the sight of your rumbling belly. She sets the tray down with practiced ease: rice, kimchi, soy-simmered roots, and a small iron pot of bubbling soup that smells like garlic, bones, and triumph. You settle in, legs crossed on the toasty floor, and lift the lid from the pot. Steam rushes upward like a genie with good intentions. You lean over it, inhale deeply, and nearly melt into your own shadow. As you eat, the scholar joins you, folding himself down as effortlessly as if gravity were optional. He picks up a slice of pickled radish with worn chopsticks and begins to speak, not as a lecture now, but as if sharing gossip with a friend. You know, he says between bites, the ondol isn't just for warmth, it's for wisdom. You pause mid-chew, politely confused. Think about it, he continues. A fire that warms you only when you sit, that humbles you, that encourages patience. You don't stand over it, you don't control it with a switch, you wait for it. You learn to time your life around its rhythm. You nod slowly. The warmth isn't a reward, it's a lifestyle. He goes on. Confucian scholars like myself, well, some more enthusiastic than me, consider the ondol symbolic. The idea that everything comes from below, that the foundation of thought, of virtue, of comfort, begins in the earth. We don't look up to find clarity, we sit, we bow, we look inward. You glance down at the warm stone beneath your feet and realize he's not just waxing poetic. There's genuine logic in the way the ondol aligns with the values of seated, contemplative living. A chair makes you tall. A floor makes you equal. Heated floors? They make you comfortable enough to stay. Between mouthfuls, you remember something odd from earlier, the way he touched the scroll before reading it, pressing it briefly to the floor. A ritual, perhaps, or a little superstition. You ask him about it. He shrugs. Old habit. We say the floor remembers better than we do. Heat lingers. Maybe ideas do too. You smile. It's absurdly poetic, and just plausible enough to believe at 1 p.m. with your ankles soaking up residual heat from cooked root vegetables. Outside, a rooster crows as if offended by how much you're enjoying this. As lunch winds down, the scholar pours more barley tea into shallow cups. The heat from the tea mirrors the floor's warmth perfectly, both quiet, both steady, both with no trace of bitterness. And just as you think it's time to stretch out for a post-meal nap, he leans forward conspiratorially and says, "Would you like to see something slightly unusual?" You nod, because how could you not? He leads you to the rear corner of the home, where the floorboards shift slightly in material. Here the clay is darker, the patterning on the hanji paper slightly uneven. You kneel beside him and peer at a faint seam. He lifts a small hatch. Beneath it, the flue inspection chamber. A narrow crawl space extends underneath the room, lined with flat stones and blackened by years of smoke. It's surprisingly clean, no loose ash or animal remains, though you're still eyeing it like a raccoon might leap out any second. This is where the smoke travels. The scholar explains that you can, in theory, crawl through it. Not recommended for large adults or people with dignity to maintain, but still, he's done it. Once, during a poorly timed game of hide-and-seek with his nephew. You lean in closer and feel the heat radiating up from the flue. Not harsh, not burning, just that familiar glowing warmth. It's like the ghost of fire, passing quietly beneath your skin. You wonder aloud how efficient this system really is. After all, the fire's heat has to travel across so much stone and distance. Doesn't it lose power? He smiles. Ah, but that's the secret. The loss is part of the gain. The slow travel is what makes it even. Gentle. It doesn't just warm one spot. It warms the whole being. You nod slowly. It's the kind of logic that might not sell in a hardware store, but absolutely sells in a nap. Historians still argue whether Ondol systems were originally designed with such philosophy in mind, or whether the philosophical framing came later, layered on like lacquer to give deeper meaning to a practical invention. Either way, they agree on this. The Ondol changed Korean life not just in architecture, but in mindset. It encouraged slowness, deliberateness, intimacy. People ate together on the floor, slept close, read by shared lamps. Homes weren't built for privacy, they were built for presence. Back in the living room, the floor has cooled slightly again. Not cold, just less persuasive. The scholar kneels and feels the mat, nodding to himself. He heads toward the kitchen. Within minutes, a small plume of smoke curls up from the hearth chimney. Another meal is probably being planned. Another round of warmth is already on its way. You lie back down, belly full, thoughts fuller. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, not yet, but to simply exist in the warmth. A warmth that comes through. Ram below, shaped by hand, remembered by stone. This fire beneath your feet. It doesn't shout. It whispers. You awaken not with a jolt, but with a gentle sense of having drifted somewhere pleasant and returned. The room hasn't changed. The light is still soft, filtered through rice paper windows. The air still smells faintly of ink, soy, and warmth. But something has shifted. The floor beneath you is hotter now, subtly, deliciously so. You sit up and realize the fire must have been stoked again during your little post-lunch haze. The Ondol's heat has reawakened, and with it, the house has taken on that dreamy afterglow that comes only from fire with nowhere to be. Curious, you decide to crawl beneath the house. Not literally, of course, although, given how often children and occasionally drunk uncles have apparently done just that, it wouldn't be historically inaccurate. But today, your guide is metaphorical. You slip outside and follow the house's edge. A few chickens cluck disapprovingly as you stoop down near the back corner, where the chimney stands like a sleepy sentinel. Here is where the smoke exits, but more interesting is the winding, hidden journey it took to get here. You crouch down, eye level with the house's stone foundation. It's low to the ground but raised just enough to allow for the flue channels that make the Ondol function. With a little imagination, and perhaps an overconsumption of barley tea, you begin to picture the flow of smoke as if it were alive. A slow, coiling serpent of heat, slithering from the kitchen hearth, inching along the dark stone corridors under each room. It doesn't move in a straight line. It doesn't rush. It wraps, it curves, it lingers where it's needed most. A warm-blooded creature hiding just beneath your feet. The scholar steps outside and joins you, holding a long bamboo stick. He points to a small trapdoor near the chimney base, an access panel for clearing ash and inspecting the flues. He slides it open, revealing a dark channel inside. You feel the heat wafting out, slow and steady. The stones around it hum quietly, as if they've been memorizing sunlight. This, the scholar says, is the path of the smoke, not just to exit, but to serve. You peer into the passage. It's not wide, maybe enough for a small child or a very determined cat, but it stretches far, disappearing into the shadows under the main room. You ask how long it takes the smoke to reach this end. Depends on the fire, he replies. A lazy fire might take half an hour to creep through. A strong one, 10 minutes. But either way, it's not about speed. It's about staying. You look again. The path isn't just functional. It's designed to delay the smoke. Each turn, each angle, each slight slope is there to slow its progress and squeeze every bit of heat from it before it escapes. Nothing is wasted. And because it moves horizontally, the heat hugs the floor for as long as possible. It doesn't rise to the ceiling or drift out through cracks. It stays where it matters, where people sit, sleep, think. You ask if the smoke ever gets stuck. He nods solemnly. Oh yes. When the flue clogs, or the chimney cap freezes in winter, or someone tosses in the wrong wood, resinous pine is the worst. It can back up. You'll know immediately. Eyes water, grandma yells, and everyone runs out with blankets over their heads. He grins. But usually it works. Quietly, reliably, like a good dog or a forgetful monk. You walk around the house with him, tracing the path from kitchen to chimney in your mind. It's longer than you expected. Some systems stretch for 10 meters or more, depending on how many rooms they serve. The complexity increases with wealth and household size, but the principle remains the same. Heat should wander. It's so unlike modern systems. You realize how much of your own heating experience is about instant results. Push button, receive, warmth. The Ondol, by contrast, requires planning, patience, and a relationship with the elements. You have to know your fire. You have to trust it. You return inside, rubbing a bit of ash from your palm. The floor is positively glowing now, heat radiating up through your knees as you kneel to adjust your robes. You glance around and imagine how different the house would feel without this. Without the Ondol, this home would be bitterly cold in winter. Stone is not forgiving. The wind seeps through gaps in the paper windows. There are no thick carpets or woolen drapes. The walls don't insulate, they echo. But with the Ondol, everything feels contained, balanced, gentle. You ask if every home had an Ondol. Almost every traditional one, he says. Poorer homes had simpler versions, a single flue, maybe one room heated if they were lucky. Richer families had elaborate branching systems, but the principle never changed. Historians still argue whether the Ondol was purely a practical adaptation to harsh Korean winters, or whether it also emerged as a cultural expression, something deeper. Some claim its spread was driven by climate alone. Others believe it reflects a deeper Korean philosophy, a reverence for slowness, rootedness, and the intimate connection between human and home. You lean back on your hands, letting the warmth seep into your palms. You like the idea that it's both. You remember reading once that in some households, children used to follow the heat trail with their hands, crawling along the floor to find the warmest patch. It became a game, like hide and seek, but with invisible fire. Even pets joined in. Old cats would seek out the flue line to nap along it like soft-bellied snakes. Dogs curled directly over the warmest spot and refused to move for hours, becoming unwilling furniture. Your host chuckles when you mention this. Yes, our dog Groen. He learned to stretch exactly along the chimney line. If you wanted him to move, you had to bribe him with rice cakes. You both laugh. The image is too vivid to ignore. Eventually, the smoke thins. The flue's breath slows. The heat stays, though, caught in the thick stone, held like memory. The Ondol doesn't fade quickly. It lingers. It waits. You press your hand to the floor again, just to confirm. Still warm, still faithful. You remain seated, spine straight but relaxed, hands resting lightly on your knees. The floor's warmth has settled into you now. It's no longer something you notice, it's something you are, like the scent of tea in your breath or the crease of your robes beneath your palms. The Ondol doesn't shout for attention. It teaches you to notice things by not changing. A teapot rattles gently on a side tray. The air smells faintly of barley, and just slightly of old books. The scholar returns with 2 cups and a quiet smile. He sits across from you, lowering himself gracefully, as though the floor has invited him personally. The tray between you is warm too. It has absorbed some of the heat from below, just enough to make the cups clink politely when touched. No part of this room escapes the fire's gentle echo. You sip your tea slowly, warm, nutty, a little earthy, nothing too bold. Exactly right for this kind of afternoon. Do you feel it? The scholar asks. You pause, mid-sip. The difference, he clarifies, between being warm and living with warmth. You consider that for a moment. There's a subtle distinction. One is momentary, the other is embedded. You nod. He's pleased. This is how every day begins, he says, with stillness, with heat that waits patiently beneath you, and with the quiet reminder that thought should come from below, from grounding, from contact, not from up in the clouds. You raise your eyebrows. He smiles. I don't mean the weather, he adds. He reaches to the side and lifts a slim scroll from the wall, its edges curled like the edges of a sleepy leaf. He unrolls it with care, revealing rows of neat Hangul and Hanja characters inked so precisely it makes your own handwriting feel like drunken chicken scratch. He reads aloud. You don't understand every word, but the cadence is soothing, steady, like the floor beneath you, like the path of the smoke. You understand enough to grasp that it's about morning ritual, about clarity of mind, about the scholar's duty to be not brilliant, but balanced. To warm others with thought the way the floor warms the room, not by flair, but by presence. This, he explains, is why Korean scholars lived so intimately with the Ondol. It wasn't just comfort, it was discipline. You couldn't rush, you couldn't slouch in a plush armchair, you couldn't stand, pace, wave your arms, or deliver thunderous monologues while circling a room. You had to sit, grounded, humble. It was the floor that made you a scholar. He pours more tea and gestures for you to sit cross-legged again. You obey without hesitation, not just because you're being polite, but because the warm floor calls for it. Your body naturally folds into the heat. Knees bend, spine straightens. Thoughts slow down. You glance around. The room is spare but not cold. Scrolls, inkstones, one modest brush rest shaped like a mountain range. No clutter, no noise. Nothing here is ornamental without also being useful. You ask if all scholars live like this. Those who wanted to think, yes, he says. Others had chairs, desks, horses. I had stone and fire, and a floor that taught me how to stay still. He pulls a small wooden drawer from the wall and shows you something unexpected. A blackened stone, about the size of a small loaf of bread. He places it in your palm. It's heavy, still faintly warm. This, he says, was heated in the flue for a few hours, then wrapped in cloth. You keep it by your inkstone to prevent freezing, or use it on especially cold moe. Trinnings to keep your lap from turning to ice. You nod. It's a clever idea, like a thermal battery with zero marketing budget. He continues. Some families had names for their stones, or passed down special ones for generations. If you lost one, he shrugs, you were expected to make up for it in poetry. You laugh. Historians still debate just how deeply the Ondol influenced Korean intellectual culture. Was it a convenient feature, or a foundational one? Did the warmth simply allow longer hours of study during harsh winters, or did it shape the posture, pacing, and philosophy of scholarship itself? The scholar has no doubt. He gestures around him. This room exists because of the fire beneath it, this rhythm, this calm. Without the Ondol, we would have had tall chairs, fast tempers, and short tempers. You suspect he's repeating a proverb, but you let it slide. He pulls out an old notebook, bound in faded cloth, and sets it between you. The pages are filled with notes, notations, and small inked diagrams of flue paths. Some are family homes. Others seem to be idealized designs. You spot one labeled Dream Room in tidy script. He turns to a page filled with floor plans. Every scholar I know has a preferred flue pattern, he says. Some favor the spiral, more heat retention. Others like the double branch, faster initial warmth. I prefer the looped serpent. He draws it with a finger, a lazy, winding path that doubles back on itself, slowing the smoke's exit and keeping heat centered beneath the reading area. Efficiency isn't the goal, he says. Comfort is, not in the sense of indulgence, but in the sense of being able to remain. You take another sip of tea and stare at the ink on the page. You begin to realize that this is more than a heating system. It's an ethic, a philosophy lived from the bottom up. The floor supports you. The fire teaches you. The smoke moves, not to escape, but to serve. You set the notebook down gently and press your hands once again to the stone beneath. You swear you can feel it sigh. You don't move for a while. You just sit there, hands resting lightly on the heated floor, eyes closed, listening. Not for anything in particular, just the creak of wooden beams shifting gently, the muted drip of water outside, the near imperceptible whisper of tea steam escaping into the rafters. The house is breathing, and somehow, so are you. You begin to understand something that eluded you before. Warmth isn't a luxury here. It's a principle, a quiet rule, and not just any warmth, the kind that seeps into you, not just onto you, the kind you live with, not in defiance of. Your host clears his throat with theatrical softness and gestures to a new scroll he's unrolling. This one isn't a lesson, it's a small poem. A Confucian verse about quiet mornings, warm feet, and the duties of stillness. The final line reads, "The floor beneath me burns slowly, but the mind must burn brighter still." You nod. That feels about right. Then he surprises you by reaching into a cabinet and pulling out a folded diagram, a cutaway of a home, multiple rooms, each with its own flue route. You realize it's a schematic for an entire household where every decision was designed around heat. You see, he says, tracing a finger across the flue lines, the Ondol isn't just a convenience. It's the axis of the entire structure. The kitchen begins it. The chimney ends it. But in between, the fire must touch everyone. You ask about sleeping. Surely warmth at night must be even more important than during the day. Ah, he says, smiling. Sleeping with fire beneath your bones? That's a kind of magic. He invites you to the family bang, the sleeping room. It's modest, like the rest of the home, with nothing but a few rolled-up quilts, a stack of cotton pillows, and a woven screen for modesty. No bed frame, no thick mattress, just floor and fabric. You step inside and immediately feel the change. The warmth here is different. It's older, faded, but present. Like a fire that left hours ago but forgot to tell the floor. The stones remember, still humming faintly under your socks. He gestures for you to lie down. You hesitate. It feels a bit intimate, but curiosity wins. You stretch out on the floor, your body pressed flat against the mat. Slowly, you feel it. The heat rising into your back, your legs, your neck. Not like a modern mattress warmer, which always feels slightly artificial and vaguely like punishment. No, this warmth feels earned, ancient, respectful. You don't need heavy blankets, the scholar explains. The warmth comes from below. The air stays cool enough to breathe. You sleep in balance. You exhale, testing the air. He's right. It's the opposite of stuffy. Your face stays crisp. Your toes are toasty. There's even a saying, he tells you, passed from grandmother to grandson. A hot face brings nightmares. A hot floor brings peace. You wonder how many children fell asleep to that rhyme, wrapped in thin quilts and the scent of scorched rice from the kitchen. Some households used charcoal in their hearths for longer-lasting heat. Others relied on wood, especially on days when soup was on the menu and fire would be going anyway. Either way, the fire would die down by bedtime, but its warmth would linger through the night. You ask what happens in summer. We rest above the flue, he says, but the fire sleeps too. The floor cools, and sometimes we sleep outside on the porch if the breeze behaves. It's elegant, seasonal, no switches, no overcorrection. The house breathes with the weather, adjusts, no fuss. Historians still debate whether the Ondol was meant originally for year-round use or strictly a winter solution. Some ancient homes show signs of being elevated well above the flue system, allowing for airflow in warmer months. Others suggest that the earliest Ondol users adjusted their behavior rather than their architecture. Either way, it worked. You roll onto your side and imagine it. A snowy night, the fire's last breath curling through the floor, a child snuggled in close to her grandmother, both drifting into dreams with the fire's memory still alive beneath them. And in the quiet, something clicks. This isn't just about heat, it's about ritual. A fire lit daily, a floor that responds, a way of life measured in embers. You remember your own nights, thermostat battles, noisy radiators, the dry buzz of artificial warmth. This is different. It's warmth that touches only what's necessary and asks nothing in return. Your host watches you from the door. It's not just the scholar who benefits, he says. Everyone in the home shares the heat. Meals are eaten where it's warmest. Conversations happen by the chimney line. Arguments, too, he adds with a grin. You sit up and look around. The room is simple, but nothing is wasted. The layout, the materials, the timing of meals and fires, all of it is shaped by one element, the fire beneath the feet. There's a kind of humility in it. You don't command the heat, you cooperate with it. Later, when you leave the sleeping room, your spine still radiating comfort, you feel changed, just a little quieter, a little more grounded. You think back to that poem. The floor burns slowly, but something inside you is definitely brighter now. The scent of something sharp and savory wafts in from the kitchen. You follow it instinctively, feet padding across the ever-warm floor as if drawn by gravity or soy sauce. The scholar is ahead of you again, slipping silently down the hallway like a man who spent his whole life gliding just above the edge of combustion. He motions for you to crouch low again at the hearth, where that same grandmother is now tending the fire once more. Her hands move expertly, flick, poke, feed. She doesn't waste emotion. You realize she's not just making lunch this time. She's setting the entire house back into motion. The kitchen is everything, the scholar says, settling beside you with a quiet grunt. It cooks the food, it warms the floors, it keeps the rhythm. You watch as the fire flares slightly, licking the pan above before ducking below to feed the Ondol once more. The grandmother sprinkles a few drops of something into the fire, a homemade broth, maybe. It hisses gently, and she smiles faintly at the sound, as if the fire just replied to her in a language only the old and the heat-literate speak. You ask her what she's making. She grunts, but the scholar translates anyway. Radish soup, fermented squash, and... He sniffs. Yes, anchovies. Again. You nod solemnly. It seems anchovies are your destiny here. You sit back and watch. The kitchen in a traditional Korean home isn't isolated. It's not a behind-the-scenes area. It is the engine. And the chef? She's the engineer, the conductor, the quiet magician. She doesn't just prepare food. She manages the heat budget for the entire house. Want a warm bedroom by sundown? Start your rice at 3 p.m. Need a cool floor in the study? Skip the lunch fire. Want to discourage a visiting uncle from staying too long? Burn too hot, too fast. She knows the timing, the pattern, when the flues need cleaning, when the chimney cap is probably iced over. She doesn't just cook, she controls time. Historians have often overlooked this role, but modern scholars are starting to correct that. The woman at the hearth wasn't just someone's mother or servant. She was the household's heat manager, its firekeeper, its warmth tactician. You glance over at the grandmother, her again, and she raises a knowing eyebrow. She knows exactly what you're thinking. It strikes you just how cooperative the system is. It's not a house that functions in isolation. It's an interwoven routine, an agreement between fire, food, and family. You ask if this ever caused arguments. Of course, says the scholar. Too much heat? The study is unbearable. Too little? The baby cries. Burn the wrong wood? The smoke lingers. Some wives used to fight over how hot to cook the rice, not because of the rice, but because it meant 2 warm floors later. He leans in. There's even a proverb. If you marry a careless cook, prepare for cold dreams. You grin. It's oddly profound, also slightly terrifying. He continues. The kitchen isn't separate from the life of the home. It is the life. The fire connects everything, and so the one who controls it holds great power. You remember that in your own world, the kitchen is often designed to be efficient, compartmentalized. Heat is an isolated tool. It exists only inside the appliance. But here, it flows, from pot to flue to floor to bed. A line of warmth runs beneath every part of the house, literally and metaphorically. You hear a sudden thud. A puff of soot pops from the hearth, and the grandmother curses softly. She grabs a flat board and fans the flame with swift, practiced strokes. The room fills with the smell of singed wood. Too much resin, she mutters. Someone brought green wood again. The scholar winces. You learn that not all wood is created equal. Pine is plentiful but sticky and unpredictable. Oak burns slower and cleaner but is harder to split. Bamboo? Don't even think about it. It burns too fast and too loud. Each fire, then, is a recipe in itself. A decision tree. What's cooking? What room needs heat? How long should it last? This isn't a kitchen. It's a control center. NASA wishes it had is kind of floor plan to flame efficiency. You sit back and take it all in. There's something deeply satisfying about the simplicity of it all. Not because it's easy, but because it works. The grandmother doesn't need a degree in thermodynamics. She just knows what time of year it is, what's in the pantry, and which stones in the flue hum the loudest. You ask if she ever forgets to light the fire. The scholar raises an eyebrow. She hasn't missed a day in 40 years. You sip your barley tea in reverent silence. Historians still puzzle over the origins of the Agunji hearth and its role in shaping Korean domestic life. Some argue it was adapted from earlier outdoor clay stoves. Others believe it evolved specifically to feed the Ondol system. Either way, by the late Joseon period, it had become indispensable, not just for food, but for daily comfort, learning, even health. You wonder if this interdependence, the fire that feeds both body and home, might have influenced the tight-knit family structure often seen in traditional Korean villages. When your floor depends on grandma's lunch and your lunch depends on last night's fire, everyone suddenly has a shared investment in keeping things warm. The soup begins to boil. The fire settles. The flue hums softly, and once again, the house fills with that radiant, invisible glow of warmth. It's not dramatic, but it's unmistakable. You press your hand to the nearby floor. And yes, already, the room is beginning to warm. The walls around you wear the past like a familiar robe. Streaks of soot above the hearth, faint smoke shadows along the beams, and a soft grayish tint to the corners of the kitchen, all left by decades of invisible visitors, fire and time. You press your hand against the nearest wall. It's cool, but smooth. Years of handling, wiping, and brushing against it have made the clay feel almost silky. The grandmother finishes stirring the pot and steps out, into the hallway, her slippers making that soft flapping sound that only comes from cloth meeting warm stone. You and the scholar remain behind, and he takes a deep breath, surveying the kitchen like a favorite book he's read too many times to count. He gestures to a small wall crack near the ceiling, where the smoke used to escape before chimneys became more common. That stain, he says, was made by my father's fire, and his father's before that. You look again. It's not just a stain, it's a memory, a fingerprint of flame. Every surface in this house has been gently smoked into remembering the life that happened here. Do you know how many arguments happen over heat? The scholar asks suddenly. You raise an eyebrow. In my family, he continues, we used to argue every winter about which room deserved the most heat. The sleeping room always won, of course, but my brother used to sneak in and wedge a clay pot under the flue to redirect more warmth to his corner. You laugh. Heat theft by pottery, it's so human it hurts. There were even rumors, he says, leaning in, of people bribing the firekeeper to accidentally let the smoke linger under their room. You ask if the floor ever got too hot. Definitely, he says, especially if someone was too ambitious with the firewood. I remember one winter, my cousin burned his own socks while sitting cross-legged too long. Never moved an inch. Said it was worth it. There's something endearing about all this. This quiet tug of war not with people, but with warmth. You can imagine the debates. Too hot, too cold, too smoky, too fast. Each room with its own complaints. Each family member secretly believing they have the most sensitive toes. Historians still discuss whether Ondol culture encouraged communal living because of this shared warmth. There's evidence that entire families would sleep together in a single heated room, using the flue path as the natural center of the home. Arguments? Of course. But there's also something bonding about sharing the same literal warmth. The scholar taps the floor beneath him. The Ondol made us negotiate. It forced us to live in each other's temperature. You glance around. There's no thermostat, no zoning, no remote control, just heat moving slowly, fairly, through the house. Everyone gets what the fire can give, and not a degree more. You stand up and move into the next room, the one just beyond the kitchen. The air here is noticeably cooler. Not cold, but no longer cradling your legs like before. You kneel and place your hand to the floor, barely a whisper of heat. This is the debate room, the scholar says with a wry grin. You ask why. Because everyone argues whether this room should be warm or not. It's furthest from the kitchen, so it gets the last of the smoke. Some say it's symbolic, wisdom arriving last. Others say it's simply cold. You touch the floor again and smile. I say symbolic. He laughs. Good answer. The walls here are slightly darker, more marked by age. You see ink splashes on the lower plaster and faint boot scuffs along the doorframe. A room clearly used for talking, pacing, maybe a little passionate disagreement, but still warmed, if barely, by the same fire as every other part of the house. Even now, as the fire in the kitchen fades to embers, you feel its echo here. And you wonder, How many families over the centuries negotiated peace over a warm patch of stone? How many arguments were softened, not solved, but softened, by the comfort of a heated floor beneath tired feet? There's something calming about knowing that warmth doesn't discriminate. It flows to all, even the stubborn, even the grumpy uncle who thinks the soup is too salty and the bed is too thin. Maybe that's what makes the Ondol so strangely humane. It teaches compromise without ever raising its voice. You step back into the main room and pause at the threshold, soaking in the sensation of heat beneath it. At your souls once again. It greets you like an old friend, the warmth not sudden but steady, as if it never left. You return to your place near the low table and settle down cross-legged. Your hands instinctively rest on your knees, your back straightens, and your breath slows. Sitting on a warm floor has a way of asking your body to be still. The scholar follows, tucking his robes beneath him as he kneels across from you again. There's something about this room, this entire house really, that has been shaped from the ground up, not just by clay and stone, but by the long memory of heat. You look around at the subtle signs, the cushions slightly worn at the edges where people tend to linger the longest, the darkened patches on the wall where steam once met smoke, and the polished wooden doorframe rubbed smooth by 1,000 passing sleeves. This floor, the scholar begins softly, has seen more than most libraries. You glance down, running your hand along the clay. It's warm, always warm. In the summer, we don't heat it, he continues, but it still remembers. It holds the heat of last winter, of all the winters before it. And so we sit here even then because, well, habit, I suppose. You ask if every Korean home used to have an ondol. Almost every traditional home, he replies, from the smallest village hut to the royal palace. Of course, the materials and precision varied. But the idea? The same, always the same. You imagine a vast kingdom of people, all connected by the slow exhale of heat beneath their homes. The same fire that warms a scholar's feet also warms the ankles of a farmer, a merchant, a mother nursing a child, a grandfather grinding ink. No matter your station, the warmth came from the earth and passed beneath your floor. A sort of quiet equality, hidden in the architecture. He gestures for you to follow once more, this time toward a wooden chest at the corner of the room. Inside are neatly stacked bundles of hanji, traditional paper made from mulberry bark. Thin, strong, and slightly crinkled from use. He lifts one and shows you the pattern. This, he says, is what we use to cover the floor. After the stone and clay, it keeps the dust down, keeps the warmth in, and it makes it easier to clean when the ink spills, because it will spill. You ask how long it lasts. Depends how much poetry happens in a year, he says, only half joking. The paper isn't just functional, it's beautiful. It gives the floor a soft, luminous texture. In the right light, it glows faintly, reflecting the golden tones of the fire beneath. When you touch it, you feel the layers below, the flat stones, the compacted clay, the silent, hot breath of the flues. You ask if children play here. He nods. Of course. This is where they learn to walk, fall, cry, nap. It's where families gather in the evening when the day's work is done and the warmth has spread through every wall. You picture it now. Tiny feet padding across the mat, warm hands grasping at wooden toys, the occasional shriek as a sibling steals a rice cake. A floor like this isn't just structure, it's memory. It holds the echoes of every small joy, every spilled teacup, every whispered bedtime story told over its radiant hush. Historians often refer to the ondol as a core identity feature in Korean domestic life. Not just a tool for heating, but a symbol of what the home meant. Intimacy, togetherness, and a deep relationship with space itself. Because the floor was used, sat upon, slept on, written on, it became not just part of the house, but part of the person. You mentioned that in many Western homes, floors are where things go. Furniture, shoes, discarded clothes. Here, it's where life happens. The scholar nods thoughtfully. When I visited Europe once, they gave me a chair. It was elegant, carved, very tall, but I didn't know what to do with my knees. The air was warm, but the ground was cold. I felt disconnected. You smile. It's true. Without realizing it, you've grown used to the floor's presence. It's become your anchor. You see, he continues, the Ondol teaches us not just how to sit, but how to stay, how to be. He pours another cup of tea and offers it to you. The cup is warm, but the floor is warmer. Later, as dusk begins to stretch across the rice paper windows, the room glows amber with the setting sun. Outside, the air is cooling quickly. Winter waits patiently, as it always does. But in here, the heat continues its silent journey through the bones of the house. And you understand now, it isn't just architecture. It's a philosophy built in stone and smoke. Evening has begun to tiptoe across the sky. The soft grays of the walls are shifting toward lavender. You hear it before you see it. The whisper of fabric being unrolled, the gentle rustle of cotton bedding unfurling across the floor. In the next room, the family is preparing for nightfall, and with it, the ritual of sleeping on stone. You follow the scholar toward the sleeping chamber again, bang in Korean, though this time, there's something different in the air. The scent of toasted rice has faded, replaced by a milder aroma. Maybe eucalyptus from the herbal sachet hanging by the window, or the subtle smell of warm cotton and oiled paper. The floor beneath your feet is warmer now than before. Not scalding, not sharp, just deeply, thoroughly warm, like bread that's been resting under a towel. The bedding is simple, cotton-stuffed quilts called yo, each carefully folded and stacked during the day, now laid out in a neat row across the floor. You crouch down and run your hand along the quilt. It's soft, hand-stitched, still holding the creases from earlier folds. Beneath it, the floor radiates gentle heat, not in bursts, not unevenly, but in one continuous hush, like the stone itself has been exhaling all afternoon and finally settled into a slow, steady breath. You lie down, not out of exhaustion, but invitation. The mat accepts your weight instantly, the floor's warmth meeting your spine with perfect trust. There's no adjusting, no poking springs or over-plumped pillows, just you and the earth-warmed clay beneath a thin layer of paper and quilt. This, the scholar says from the doorway, is the part everyone remembers. You smile, eyes closed. Of course it is. Sleeping with fire beneath your bones, it sounds dangerous, a little rebellious. But here, in this house, it feels like the safest thing in the world. The warmth isn't fiery, it isn't aggressive, it's residual. It's what's left over after someone else's work has finished. It's the reward of a day's fire, now dimmed and distant, but still present, like a kind grandparent watching over you from the other room. You ask, with your head still on the quilt, how long the heat lasts. Depends, he says, walking slowly around the bedding. A good fire at dinner can keep this room warm until dawn, sometimes longer, especially if the flues are well tended and the stones well laid, but even if the fire goes cold, the floor stays loyal. You open one eye. Loyal? He shrugs. It remembers the flame, that's all we ask of it. Outside, the wind stirs, rattling the paper windows just a little, but inside, nothing changes. The warmth doesn't flicker or fade. It simply is. He settles into his own bedding beside you, folding his legs beneath him before lying back with a sigh. In winter, he says, we used to race for the warmest spot. Grandmother always won. She claimed it with her elbows. You chuckle. But we didn't mind, he adds, because the heat would spread. It always does. A warm corner isn't greedy, it's generous. You lie still for a while. Your eyes begin to lose focus on the wooden beams above. The warmth is so even, so unintrusive, it's as though your body forgets it's even lying on stone. You'd think this would be uncomfortable. You'd think you'd miss the softness of a mattress, the fluff of a pillow-top bed. But you don't. What you feel is support, subtle, firm, kind, a floor that holds you evenly, honors your weight, never creaks or sags or threatens to collapse. A floor that simply exists to offer you the memory of fire. Historians have long noted that the Ondol wasn't just about thermal comfort, it was about psychological comfort. To sleep on a warm floor in a cold world is to feel the world has not forgotten you, that someone cared enough to feed a fire whose warmth you'll never see, but still feel. And that's what makes this so profound. The fire is gone, long gone. Hours ago, the grandmother closed the hearth, patted down the ashes, and wiped her hands. But its traces remain, curled invisibly through the flue tunnels, resting beneath the stone, whispering up into your back like a lullaby with no words. Some families even left small offerings beside the hearth before bed, a grain of rice, a sliver of dried seaweed, a drop of tea. Not superstition, just gratitude, a quiet thank you to the flame that would sleep beneath them. You ask the scholar if he still does that. I do, he says, eyes already closed. Sometimes I whisper too, but the fire never answers. You lie still for another long moment, eyes tracing the wooden beam above you. The house creaks slightly as it settles into night. The warmth below you doesn't waver. You imagine the path of the smoke again, hours ago, curling beneath this very room, slipping through its stone corridors like a story written in steam. You turn on your side. The warmth shifts with you, catching your shoulder, your hip, your toes. It's everywhere, and yet it asks nothing of you. No blankets to kick off, no vents to shut, no switches to flip. Just you and the fire that already happened, and the floor still remembering. Morning does not arrive with a bang here. It slides in quietly, like a page being turned in a book you forgot you were reading. You stir in the warmth, still swaddled in the cotton quilt, your body comfortably caught between dreaming and waking. Outside, the sky has begun to shift, pale gray bleeding into a hint of soft blue. You don't move at first. Why would you? The floor beneath you is still warm, not quite as hot as the night before, but radiating a tender, faithful heat. You stretch one foot out of the bedding and press it flat against the mat. Yes, there it is. The lingering memory of fire, held lovingly in the stones. Somewhere in the house, someone is already awake. You hear the soft sound of slippers sliding against stone, the brush of paper doors opening and closing. The familiar scent of toasted barley tea drifts in from the kitchen, accompanied by something subtler, an aroma both savory and scorched. Burnt rice. You sit up slowly and breathe in again. It's nurungji, the scorched rice crust left at the bottom of the pot after cooking. And here, it's not a mistake, it's a delicacy. Koreans have prized that bottom layer for centuries, scraping it off the pot and either chewing it plain or turning it into tea. You smile. Breakfast is beginning, and the floor already knows it. You rise, wrap the quilt, and fold it in a series of practiced tucks, setting it in the corner like everyone else. No one leaves their bedding sprawled across the floor all day here. The room is lived in, then released. The Ondol has more to do, more warmth to give. And besides, clutter would ruin the aesthetic. Warmth deserves dignity. Stepping out into the hallway, you feel the temperature change instantly. The corridor floor is cooler, not heated yet, perhaps waiting for the day's cooking fire. You pull your sleeves tight and make your way toward the kitchen, drawn by the unmistakable aroma of morning. Inside, the grandmother is once again at her post. She stands over the agunji with the kind of quiet dominance that says she's not to be questioned, not even by the fire. She's just finished boiling a pot of rice, the steam still clinging to the rafters like slow-moving clouds. She removes the pot carefully, leaving behind a thick, crackled layer of golden brown rice at the bottom. With a wooden spatula, she chips away at the crust, stacking the fragments in a bamboo bowl. You're handed one before you even open your mouth to ask. It's crunchy, faintly nutty, and still warm from the cooking pot. You bite down, and it shatters like autumn leaves underfoot. You sit on the kitchen floor, where the heat is strongest. Directly above the firebox, the stones radiate like sun-baked earth. You shift your legs a little to avoid the hottest spots, much like a cat circling 3 times before settling. The scholar joins you with 2 cups of sungnyung, tea made by pouring hot water over the nurungji crust. The result is a faintly toasty, golden-hued drink that smells like patience. This, he says, sipping, is what the fire leaves behind. Not just heat, not just warmth, but taste, memory. You take a sip. It's mellow, comforting, slightly smoky in the best possible way, like the drink version of an old story retold by candlelight. You ask if nurungji was always this beloved. Always, he replies. Even kings asked for it. It reminded them they were still human, that even burnt rice has a place. You smile. It's humbling and strangely profound. Historians note that nurungji became symbolic of thrift, patience, and comfort, an accidental product of heat turned into something ritual. Like the Ondol itself, it was never about waste. It was about use. Nothing is discarded. Everything is transformed. You watch the grandmother stir the next pot, preparing soup to go with the rice. You can see the fire burning low in the hearth, just enough to cook but not smoke out the family. The chimney draws steadily. The heat beneath your feet spreads slowly outward, reaching the sleeping room you just left, curling under the study where ink is likely already drying. It's almost like the house is waking up, room by room, stone by stone. You step out into the yard while breakfast finishes. The chimney on the far side of the house puffs gently, thin curls of smoke trailing into the pale morning sky. You can almost trace the flue line beneath the building, visualizing it like a glowing vine of warmth. It runs beneath each room in turn, touching each life, then disappearing into the air like breath. You walk the perimeter slowly, each step a quiet thank you to the engineers, masons, grandmothers, and forgotten builders who made this warmth possible. The house is small, but it feels complete, not in spite of its simplicity, but because of it. You kneel near the chimney and press your hand against the stone. It's faintly warm. Faintly. But it's there. The last whisper of heat, leaving the house not in anger or urgency, but in the kind of calm departure you'd expect from someone who knows they'll be back tomorrow. Back inside, breakfast is served. The family gathers low around the floor tray, each person cross-legged, bowl in hand. There are no chairs. No din, set. Just mats, heat, and the kind of quiet conversation that floats on steam. You're handed a bowl, rice, soup, a sliver of pickled root. You bow your thanks and take your place. The floor beneath you is just warm enough to soften the stiffness of the morning. You feel your joints relax, your shoulders drop. You ask the scholar if this ever gets old. He shakes his head. No, the fire changes every day. The heat is never the same twice, and every morning, the floor feels a little different. You think about that for a moment. How strange and wonderful that something as ordinary as a floor can surprise you daily. That even warmth, when built into stone and ritual, becomes something alive. The tea is poured, the rice is shared, the room fills with steam and conversation, and the quiet strength of warmth well earned. And under it all, the floor holds everything. After breakfast, the family disperses in that unspoken, practiced choreography only long-living households master. The scholar's wife begins folding the bedding in the far room, humming softly to herself. The grandmother vanishes into the kitchen once again. No one knows precisely when she rests or if she ever does. The youngest child pads toward the outer yard, chasing a wind-blown scrap of paper, and you are left sitting in the quiet warmth of the main room with your host, still nursing the last sips of sungnyung. The floor beneath you is still warm, but slightly different now. You notice it's faded just a little in the spots where the flue ends. You shift your weight, settling over a slightly hotter section, as naturally as if your body has developed a sixth sense for subterranean fire. Your host stretches his legs with a satisfied sigh. You know, he says, foreigners never trusted the floor. You blink. What do you mean? He grins, swirling the tea in his cup. When Westerners first visited Kor, they thought we were half mad, sleeping on stone, eating cross-legged, heating the entire house with kitchen smoke. They were convinced it was dangerous, or at the very least, uncivilized. You laugh. It sounds absurd now, but you can imagine it. Outsiders in heavy boots and high collars, frowning at the simplicity, mistaking it for poverty or backwardness. They missed the genius of it, the scholar continues. They came from places where fireplaces were status symbols, tall, decorative, visible. You had to see the fire to feel comforted. Our fire? He taps the floor. Invisible, hidden, quiet, and far more useful. You nod, remembering the drafty castles and Victorian parlors you've read about. Rooms warmed in uneven patches, corners freezing, chairs pulled desperately close to grates that belched smoke. Here, the heat is silent and symmetrical, humble even, but complete. And the idea of eating on the floor? He adds with a grin. They thought it was barbaric, said chairs were the mark of civilization. You smile. And what did your ancestors say? He chuckles. They said chairs made people forget their place. It's a curious reversal. In so many Western narratives, the floor is low, inferior, undesirable. But here, in a house shaped by Ondol, the floor is honored. Not just warmed, it's respected. The place where meals are shared, books are written, children are born, and ancestors remembered. You're reminded of something he said earlier. We don't heat the room, we heat the people. Now you feel it fully. The Ondol isn't a background feature, it's the heart of the home. Every inch of architecture bends around it. Historians still discuss how these differences shaped cultural perceptions. Some argue the Western hearth, visible, elevated, dominant, reflected a more individualistic structure. The fireplace as a stage, a spotlight, a power symbol. By contrast, the Korean Ondol is democratic, flat, unseen. It doesn't beg your attention, it just serves. Whether you're a scholar or a child, a guest or a grandmother, the floor gives warmth without favoritism. And yet, the scholar adds, stretching his legs further, those same foreigners who mocked it often stayed longer than they meant to. They'd come to ask questions, and hours later they'd be lying on the floor, half asleep, mumbling about how surprisingly pleasant it was. You raise your eyebrows. One man, he continues, a German, I think. He stayed for 3 days, said he was studying the heating system. I think he just liked how his feet felt. You both laugh. And the missionaries? You ask. Oh, especially them, he replies. At first, they insisted on beds and chairs, imported furniture. But by the second winter, many gave up. They realized the Ondol was more effective than their stoves. Quietly, they started designing homes with flues under the floor. There's a sort of poetic irony in it. The reluctant converts, literally warmed into submission. But of course, he says, his tone shifting slightly, not everyone stayed open-minded. Some claimed the Ondol was unhealthy, that it caused bad posture, that it encouraged laziness. You tilt your head. Well, think about it, he adds, with the glint of a man who's had this argument before. They saw people reclining on the floor, reading, dozing, sipping tea, writing slowly. To them, that was idleness. But to us, that was living. That was the ideal. You nod. You felt it yourself. The floor slows you down. It invites stillness. It doesn't ask you to stand tall. It asks you to sit deep, to breathe slower, to notice more. You ask if there were ever efforts to modernize homes by removing the Ondol. Ah, he says, frowning slightly. There was a time, yes, during rapid industrialization. Concrete replaced clay, oil heaters replaced wood fires, and suddenly the floor was just floor again. He sighs. Some of us kept it alive. In rural homes, in temples, in stubborn old scholars' houses like this one. But for a while it seemed the Ondol might vanish. You glance around. The room you're sitting in feels timeless, but now you realize how fragile that illusion is. This warmth has survived war, colonization, industrial revolutions, and real estate developers with bad taste. What brought it back, you ask? He smiles. Nostalgia and winter. You laugh, of course. People remembered, he says. They remembered the way it felt, the way you could walk barefoot in December and feel your ancestors in the stone, the way a bowl of soup tasted better when your toes were warm. And slowly, the Ondol returned. Modernized, perhaps, but still rooted in the old principles. Indeed, today, many Korean homes, especially apartments, use radiant floor heating systems inspired directly by the Ondol. Pipes now carry hot water instead of smoke, and thermostats have replaced kitchen fires, but the idea is the same. Heat should come from the ground, and warmth should be something you live on, not just near. Your host stands, stretches, and cracks his knuckles. I do not envy their buttons and dials, he says, but I'm glad they still feel the warmth. You press your hand to the floor again. It's beginning to cool now, gently, almost apologetically, but the heat hasn't left. Not really. It has simply done its job. The floor is beginning to cool now, ever so slightly. It's a gradual thing, like dusk slipping over the edge of the day. You wouldn't notice if you weren't paying such close attention. If your hands hadn't grown accustomed to measuring warmth by touch alone, if your body hadn't tuned itself to the quiet rhythm of heat beneath your feet. The scholar smiles at your pause. You feel it, don't you? He says, kneeling down once more and brushing the mat beside you with the back of his hand. The warmth changes, even when everything else stays still. That's how we knew it was time to start another fire. You nod. He's right. You do feel it. And apparently, so did generations before you. But not all those generations were without consequence. As with any long-standing tradition, the Ondol had its drawbacks. In this still and peaceful home, it's easy to romanticize the fire, its loyalty, its subtlety, its power. But as the scholar now reminds you, sometimes the fire did not behave. You both walk slowly toward the small inspection hatch near the chimney. He kneels and opens it gently, revealing the long black flue tunnel beneath the house. The smell of old ash wafts up, not unpleasant, but rich with history. You peer in, picturing the smoke that once curled through here like a silent guest. This, he says, tapping the stone rim, is where mistakes reveal themselves. He explains that while the Ondol system is elegantly simple in design, it carries risks when misunderstood or neglected. A blocked flue could fill a room with smoke or carbon monoxide. An overzealous fire might crack the clay, leak fumes, or even cause the bedding above to scorch. In rare but real instances, entire homes caught fire, and those who slept too close to the floor, especially children, sometimes woke with lungs filled with more than dreams. You shift slightly where you sit, reminded that even gentle systems carry sharp edges. Historians, he says, still argue whether the Ondol was ever truly dangerous. Some claim deaths were rare, the product of carelessness. Others suggest that fatalities were simply unrecorded, absorbed into the natural risks of rural life. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. He pauses, brushing soot from his fingers. But we learned. We adapted. Families developed routines to prevent such accidents. Flues were cleaned seasonally, kindling was carefully chosen, damp wood avoided at all costs. Children were taught the difference between warm and too warm as early as they were taught to walk, and no one, not even the eldest, slept directly over the firebox. That was common knowledge, handed down in warnings folded between lullabies. Even today, the scholar says, some elders test the floor with a paper fan before letting the children lie down. You ask how. They place it on the floor. If it curls too quickly, the heat is too strong. If it doesn't curl at all, there's no point lying down. You smile, low-tech thermostat. And some, he adds. Just listen. The floor makes a sound when it's too hot. A soft ticking, like the stones are whispering their complaints. You listen now, but the house is quiet. The floor has cooled to a steady hum, not cold, but resting, as it should be. Later, over another shared cup of barley tea, he pulls out an old woodblock print. It shows a traditional house like his, cross-section to reveal the intricate flue system beneath. A wide, smoky ribbon runs from the kitchen hearth beneath 3 rooms before curling upward into the chimney. There are annotations in fine calligraphy, notes on slope angles, stone size, vent placement. This one, he says, was drawn by a builder, an artisan. He never went to school, but he understood heat better than most scientists. He could balance a fire so that 3 rooms stayed warm through the night, and no one ever woke up coughing. You study the print. It's beautiful, not just in design, but in intention. Every curve of the smoke path exists for a reason. Nothing is ornamental, and nothing is wasted. You ask if this artisan built his home. No, the scholar says. He built my father's home. Mine, I built myself. You look around the room anew. The knowledge it took to create this warmth passed through the hands of builders, through the smoke-stained pages of guides like this one, through the trial-and-error wisdom of grandmothers, feels astonishing. You ask if young people today still learn this. He hesitates. Some do, he says slowly, mostly in the countryside, or from stubborn old teachers like me. You both chuckle. But more often, he adds, they rely on thermostats, underfloor heating systems controlled by buttons and apps. More precise, maybe, but not as personal. You ask if he uses any of those in this home. I tried, he says, grimacing. The installer laughed, said the wiring would be a nightmare. So he stayed with wood, with smoke, with flame. And though he doesn't say it aloud, you sense he's glad he did. There's something irreplaceable about the experience of living with fire, not controlling it with a switch, not programming it from your phone, but preparing for it, feeding it, waiting for it to arrive, trusting it to linger. As evening falls again, you feel the cool returning to the air, not sharply, not cruelly, just enough to stir your attention. And right on cue, from the kitchen, you hear the rustle of firewood, the soft thud of a clay lid removed, the first polite crackle of flame. The grandmother is building another fire, not just for soup, not just for tea, but for you, for the floor, for everything this house holds together. And so, once again, the smoke will travel, silently, slowly, through the flues, beneath the rooms, into the stones, into your bones. Warmth reborn, whispering, alive. The fire begins again, not in spectacle, not in drama, but in purpose. It crackles in the hearth with the rhythm of breath, never roaring, never shouting. Just the quiet, careful flicker of a flame that knows exactly where it's going. You sit in the main room once more, wrapped in your robe, watching the floor change beneath you without ever moving. The heat is subtle at first. You barely notice it until your fingertips brush the clay mat and feel a faint warmth rising, curling upward like an invisible stream. The fire hasn't reached you yet, not directly, but it's coming. You sip your barley tea slowly, watching the flames from a respectful distance. The grandmother is crouched beside the hearth, sliding a few sticks into the agunji with that same serene authority. She doesn't measure the fire by temperature, not exactly. She listens to it, watches the shadows on the walls, notes how the smoke curls, how the pot shifts on the stones. She adjusts the fuel by instinct alone. The scholar leans toward you, his tone quieter than usual. Do you know, he says, that the Ondol helped shape the entire future of Korean architecture? You shake your head. He sets his tea down carefully, then begins to trace an imaginary layout across the floor with his finger. You see, everything in the traditional Korean house, or hanok, was designed around the path of the smoke, not the people, not the walls, the smoke. You raise an eyebrow. He nods. First, the kitchen must be placed near the south side, where the sun helps warm it in the winter. Then, the flues run horizontally under the rooms, ending on the north end where the chimney rises. The warmest room ends up closest to the hearth, usually the family's sleeping room. The coolest, farthest one, often used for storage or guests. You glance toward the sleeping chamber you'd napped in earlier. It makes sense now. That was the warmest spot in the house, not by accident, but by design. You don't build around the heat, he continues. You build for it. The walls, the doors, the very slope of the roof, all shaped so that the heat would know where to go. You ask if this was true in wealthier homes as well. Oh yes, he says. Palaces had multiple flue systems, entire complexes of Ondol channels. Servants tended fires all day long just to keep the nobles' rooms evenly heated. In some royal homes, each prince had his own private flue. There was even a word for it, flue favoritism. You laugh. And in the poorest homes? He pauses. Sometimes just one room, one hearth, one flue. But even then, it was enough. One good fire can make a room feel like a castle. Historians have written about the deep link between the Ondol and the architectural evolution of Korean homes. Because everything, had to be low to the ground. You couldn't build a tall bed or a towering throne. You couldn't cover the floor in carpets or thick furniture. You needed light materials, open space, room to breathe. And so, Korean homes evolved to reflect this vertical humility. Low tables, floor seating, foldable bedding, open walls that could slide away to merge one room into another. Even the body adjusted. Posture, gait, the way people sat, even how they poured tea, all shaped by a life lived close to the ground. The scholar rises now, gesturing for you to follow. You both walk slowly toward the back room, stepping from warmer stone to cooler tile, the temperature shift like walking through time. This, he says, sliding open a low paper screen, is where the royal engineers used to sketch flue paths for entire complexes. This is my modest tribute. You step inside a room filled with floor plans. Ink diagrams cover the walls, some meticulous, others clearly personal experiments. There are flue paths shaped like fish, like rivers, like sleeping dragons. One even curls into a perfect spiral, like a snail made of fire. These are not just drawings, he says. They're ideas. Each one an attempt to make the fire smarter, gentler, more efficient. You kneel beside one labeled The Thinking Serpent. The notes indicate a flue that loops, rests beneath the floor, then doubles back to reheat the coldest corner before exiting. Did it work? You ask. He smiles. It worked too well. Burned my study scrolls from beneath. You both laugh. He shows you another, Silent Fox, a configuration meant for quick bursts of heat in only one room. Then, the long sleep, which warmed 3 rooms sequentially, with calculated delay, so each would be warm just in time for its assigned task. Tea, reading, rest. These designs, he says, are like music. Each one has a tempo, a tone, a rhythm. The fire is the melody. You look around. This man has spent his life thinking about heat as if it were a living thing. And now, you're starting to see it too. You return to the main room just as the warmth finally reaches it. You can feel the change immediately. The air hasn't moved, the walls are still, but the floor hums. The heat has arrived, not aggressively, not suddenly, but as if it was always meant to be here. You sit again, palms to the mat, eyes soft. This is what they meant, you realize, by fire in the bones. Not rage, not fury, just presence. Quiet strength rising from the earth. You see, the scholar says, easing down beside you. Even now, with all our modern tools, people come back to the Ondol. You ask why? Because warmth, he says, is not just about temperature. It's about trust. You trust the floor to hold you. You trust the fire to return. And you trust that whoever built your home knew what they were doing. He pours you another cup of barley tea, and this time, you sip it without thinking. The warmth on your tongue is the same warmth in your spine. No separation, no division. Just you, the house, the fire, and the slow, steady stone beneath your skin. The day outside has aged into that quiet, golden hour, when the light softens and the world feels like it's pausing before dusk. Inside the home, however, there is no pause, just a shift in rhythm. The warmth has returned in full now, wrapping the rooms in its familiar embrace, seeping through the walls, rising through the floor like an old friend slip, ping back into conversation. You find yourself moving differently now, slower but not sluggish, more attentive. You walk the hallway with barefoot confidence, aware of every subtle difference beneath your feet, where the heat curls strongest, where the clay holds it tight, where the stones have cooled slightly around the corners of the house. Your body has begun to learn what Korean architects knew instinctively: the floor is your compass. As you return to the central room, you pass the scholar's wife placing a tray of small dishes near the edge of the warmest section of the floor. The table isn't more than 6 inches high, and she moves with the grace of someone who has never had to think about chairs. She sits down cross-legged without a sound, and the quiet clink of ceramic on lacquered wood echoes like a drum in a padded room. The family begins to gather. There's no call to dinner, no bell, no shouted names. They just know. Like fire knows to rise, like smoke knows to drift. It's dinner time, and that means returning to the warmth. You're invited, of course, to sit. The warmth beneath you cradles your thighs as you fold yourself into a comfortable lean, propping an elbow on your knee. The meal is modest but satisfying. Seasoned greens, tofu simmered in soy broth, tiny salted fish with eyes like polished seeds. Everything served warm, everything shared. You look around the table and realize something strange. Not one person is sitting in the exact same posture. One has both legs tucked beneath, one kneels, one cross-legged, another sideways. It's not chaotic, it's just adaptive. The floor allows for it. It encourages you to find the position that suits you in the moment. You ask the scholar if there was ever a formal etiquette for sitting on the floor. Of course, he says, especially in noble homes. The left knee forward, the right foot tucked, hands on, thighs when listening. But over time, comfort won. He picks up a small bowl and smiles. And anyway, no one holds perfect posture after 2 cups of makgeolli. You chuckle. Sitting on the floor changes more than your posture. It changes your perspective. The world seems lower, wider, more grounded. Eye contact becomes easier. You're not towering or craning. You're just there, at the level of everyone else. It makes sense that such a seating culture shaped Korean furniture too. In traditional homes, everything is scaled down. Tables are small and portable. Storage is built into the walls or kept in lightweight chests that can be moved easily. Chairs are nearly non-existent. Even desks are low, built for kneeling or sitting cross-legged. You begin to realize the Ondol did more than warm homes. It sculpted them. No heavy sofas, no tall wardrobes, everything needed to accommodate the floor. And because the floor was sacred, warm, clean, lived on, shoes were never allowed to touch it, not just out of respect, but necessity. You don't track mud onto a fire, the scholar's wife says, gently wiping a tiny smudge from the paper flooring with a damp cloth. She explains that in many homes, especially in older times, the family would clean the floor every evening before bed. It wasn't just hygiene, it was ritual. A clean floor meant a clear mind, and a clear mind meant better sleep, better conversation, better dreams. You ask if the floor ever got too warm for comfort. The scholar nods. In summer especially, sometimes people would avoid certain rooms during the day, but at night, when the fire rested, the floor released its stored heat gently, like a sigh. And you'd find the perfect patch, just warm enough to relax your back, cool enough to fall asleep. It's fascinating to think of a home where furniture isn't king, where there's no prized armchair, no favored recliner. Here, the prized possession is a stretch of floor that hits just right after dinner, a small personal kingdom of warmth, shared without borders. You ask about gyue, how they're received in such an open, floor-based space. With care, the scholar says, you offer them the warmest spot first. You place cushions under their knees. You serve them tea quickly so they don't notice the floor squeaks. He smiles. And if they stay too long? He shrugs. You accidentally forget to stoke the hearth. You both laugh. Even in warmth, there is strategy. Historians often reflect on the way floor culture shaped Korean social behavior. The proximity created by shared floor spaces meant that families stayed close, physically and emotionally. Conversations happened in clusters. Meals were communal. Privacy was achieved not through walls or separate rooms, but through tone, timing, and a well-placed folding screen. Even conflict softened in such spaces. It's hard to shout at someone when you're both sitting on the same mat, elbows brushing, your bowls steaming together on the same table. The scholar raises a thought you hadn't considered. You know, he says, many of our ancestral rites, the ceremonies for remembering the dead, also take place on the floor. We kneel, bow, offer food and drink. We keep them close to the ground, where the warmth is. You glance toward the small family shrine in the corner. A wooden tablet rests on a shelf, surrounded by candles and dried flowers. A familiar place, a warm place. You realize now that the floor holds more than heat. It holds history, memory, even mourning. A fire that warms the living and remembers the dead. It's humbling. Later, as the dishes are cleared and the sky outside deepens into a rich navy blue, you stretch your legs and lie back, arms behind your head, staring at the wooden beams above. You're not tired, but the floor is convincing. Its warmth rises steadily into your spine, into your neck, into your thoughts. And just like that, you understand why this was never just hit Ekshur. It was a lifestyle, a culture, a philosophy written not in books, but in fire, stone, and sleep. Evening settles like silk across the Hanok. The house, once filled with quiet activity, bowls being stacked, rice being stirred, footsteps soft on clay, has entered its night form. The rhythm is slower now. The speech is quieter. The warmth, if possible, feels deeper, as if the house itself is sighing into slumber. You're sitting again on the main floor, your spine molded to the heated stone, sipping a final cup of tea as shadows stretch softly across the paper doors. There's no need for overhead lights. A single oil lamp flickers gently on the floor table, its glow pooling like honey on the oiled paper surface. The scholar has returned to his usual spot, resting his elbow on a low cushion, legs folded beneath him. He looks as though he's been carved into the floor. A fixture, like the stones themselves. It's not stiffness, it's serenity. You realize the house has taught him how to sit, how to be still. He sets down his teacup and says, "You've seen how we sleep, how we eat, how we learn on the floor. But there's one more thing the Ondol has shaped, something more sacred." You glance over at him. He speaks now with the measured weight of someone nearing the heart of a truth. "Ritual," he says. "The floor is where we honor our dead." He gestures toward the small family shrine tucked into a recessed alcove. There's nothing ornate about it, just a raised wood platform, 3 small tablets of ancestors' names, a flickering candle, and a dish with dried tangerine slices laid out like offerings. You stand and follow him to the space. You kneel instinctively, not because you know the rules, but because the floor asks you to. It seems wrong to stand while in the company of so much memory. The warmth is still present beneath your knees. Not intense, not new, but old warmth. Settled, like it's been holding this spot for generations. We bow here, he says quietly. We place the food on the floor. We burn incense and we say nothing loud. The warmth under us tells us they are near. You ask if every household had a space like this. In the old days, yes, he says. Even the poorest families found a corner for their ancestors. Sometimes it was just a shelf or a stone. Sometimes a scroll hung low so you could kneel before it, but always low, always near the ground, always overheat. You look at the tablet again. You wonder what it means to kneel where your grandmother once knelt, to bow over the same flue that carried her warmth through the house decades ago. In this moment, history doesn't feel like dates or kings or battles. It feels like stone, like ash, like ritual heat. Some say, the scholar whispers, that the ancestors still travel by smoke. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Just a saying. But there's something comforting in the thought, isn't there? That the smoke rises through the same rooms they once walked. That the floor remembers the weight of their feet. Historians, you later learn, do in fact debate the symbolic connections between Ondol systems and ancestral rites. Some scholars argue the correlation is merely spatial. Both rituals and sleeping happened on the floor, because that's where life unfolded. Others believe it was more spiritual. Warmth beneath your knees was a kind of unseen presence, a way of acknowledging the fire that came before you. In rural villages, ancestral ceremonies were often held just above the flue path. Incense would drift upward into the ceiling beams, and families would sit cross-legged for hours in silent homage, sipping tea, eating dried fruit, and occasionally sharing stories of the departed. Nothing dramatic, just quiet remembering. You return to your spot in the main room, and as you sit, you notice something else. How natural the act of kneeling has become. Not forced, not ceremonial, just comfortable, just correct. This is the effect of the Ondol. It teaches you to lower yourself, not in humiliation, but in respect. You sit where others sat. You sleep where others slept. You press your palms to the same clay, warmed by the same principle, a fire that hides and yet never stops giving. It's no wonder, then, that life on the floor shaped the rituals of Korean families. The way they prayed, the way they apologized, the way they celebrated a new year or a new child, or the first spoonful of rice from the harvest. Everything happened at floor level, and because the floor was warm, the memories were warm too. The scholar begins describing Jesa, the traditional ancestral rite held annually in many homes. It takes place at midnight or dawn. A full table of symbolic foods is laid out. Each item has meaning. Chestnuts for the sons, jujubes for daughters, slices of steamed beef laid on fine porcelain. And at the front of it all, a pair of chopsticks resting across a bowl of rice. Never touched, never disturbed. The spirits eat first, he says, and we sit on the floor, quietly, waiting. You ask if people still do it. Fewer now, he admits, but many still kneel once a year. Even if they don't believe, they remember. The floor teaches remembrance. Later, long after the food has been eaten and the tea gone cold, you remain seated. You think of your own rituals, birthdays in chairs, holidays at tables, funerals with standing eulogies, and wonder how differently memory would feel if it were made on warm stone, with your hands resting on earth instead of pressed into your pockets. The scholar rises at last and moves to extinguish the oil lamp. The flame dances once before fading. The room dims. The warmth remains. No longer a source of fire, now simply a presence. And as the night folds itself over the house once more, you lie back on the mat, feeling the heat hum beneath your ribs, beneath your spine, beneath the very center of you. And you wonder, if you were to go, and so, Mion years from now sat right here, knees tucked beneath them, tea in hand, would the floor remember you? The room is quiet now, though not entirely still. The kind of quiet that has depth, where the walls seem to breathe with you and the floor murmurs warmth beneath your skin like a soft lullaby. There's no ticking clock, no creaking bed frame, no hum of an overhead fan, just the fire's memory and your own. You shift slightly on your mat, adjusting your weight to one side, and the floor receives you without protest. Every time you move, the heat feels freshly distributed, like the stone itself is paying attention. It's not alive, you know, but after this many hours lying close to it, it's hard not to wonder. The scholar is snoring gently across the room, wrapped in his quilt like a burrito, face half buried in cotton folds. The rest of the family has long since settled. The lamp has gone out. The last teacup was emptied an hour ago, and yet the floor is still warm. You reach down and touch it again, curious perhaps, or simply grateful. Still warm, not hot, not cooling quickly, but holding. The warmth hasn't changed much since the fire was banked. That's the genius of the Ondol. It doesn't just heat, it holds. And you remember what the scholar said earlier, something about trust. You trust the fire to stay long after its flames are gone. You trust the stone not to change its mind in the middle of the night. It's a strange feeling, lying so low to the earth and yet feeling so secure. You're used to height meaning safety, a second-floor bedroom, a high mattress, a locked door. But here, security comes from depth, from proximity, from touching the thing that touches the world. You ask yourself, when did we start trying to separate ourselves from the ground? When did heat become something we projected from walls, instead of something we invited beneath us? Historians trace the loss of floor culture in many countries to industrialization. With mass production came mass architecture, straight walls, identical furniture, prefab layouts with central heating. No one had time to kneel anymore. No one thought to ask the heat to stay close. But Korea resisted that change, at least for a while. Rural homes kept the old ways longer than cities did. Scholars like your host built houses the slow way, the hard way. With hand-packed clay, precisely angled flues, and wood chosen not just for how it burned, but how it sounded when you snapped it. And so the Ondol endured, and still endures. In fact, in modern Korean apartments, radiant floor heating, powered by hot water pipes instead of smoke, is not just common, it's expected. It's one of the few ancient technologies that made the leap into the digital age without losing its soul. The scholar explained that earlier. People complain about the wiring now, he said with a smirk, but they still want warm feet. Even in luxury hotels, even in high-rise condos, the concept remains: heat the person, not the space. Let warmth come from below, not from vents above. And more than that, it's psychological, it's emotional. There's a profound difference between standing in a hot room and lying down on a warm floor. One pushes, the other welcomes. You shift again, stretching your legs just slightly, and the floor rises to meet you. Not literally, of course, but it feels that way. Like being cradled in sleep, not just cushioned. And that's the point. The Ondol isn't just a heating system. It's a philosophy made physical. Even now, centuries after its invention, scholars debate its origins. Some say it dates back over 2,000 years, perhaps even to the early kingdoms of Goguryeo and Baekje. Archaeologists have uncovered Ondol systems beneath ancient stone homes, their flues still visible, black stars, keened with soot from long-extinct fires. Others argue it emerged later, refined in the Goryeo dynasty and perfected in the Joseon era. But the exact beginning? That's still murky. And that's fitting, isn't it? Something born of smoke and fire should have a hazy history. You don't need an origin date to understand its value. You just need to lie here, quiet, barefoot, listening. The house creaks softly in the night. Somewhere outside, a breeze stirs the pine branches. You feel a wisp of cooler air drift through the edge of the room, but the floor never wavers. It holds steady, unbothered by the wind. You wonder what it would be like to grow up with this, to never fear cold toes on winter mornings, to wake each day already wrapped in warmth, to associate the earth itself with comfort, not hardship. No wonder so much life took place on the floor in these homes. It wasn't just space saving, it was instinct. When the ground welcomes you, you don't reach for chairs. You sit, you share, you lean into the warmth. The scholar's voice interrupts your thoughts, sleep thick, mumbling through half-dream. Don't forget to turn the flue handle before dawn, he murmurs. You smile in the dark. You have no idea where the flue handle is, and you're fairly sure he's dreaming. But you appreciate the gesture, because even in sleep, he's thinking of the fire. You lie back down. Your shoulder sinks into the mat. Your feet find their favorite patch. Your breath slows. And beneath it all, beneath the cotton, the clay, and the paper, the floor remembers. It remembers the fire. It remembers you. And it will hold this heat, just a little longer. By now, the night has deepened into that hushed, indigo stillness that belongs only to hours most people sleep through. The sky outside has turned the color of wet slate, and the stars, faint, scattered, blink like distant embers trying not to go out. Inside the house, the silence is complete. Not an eerie silence, but the kind that hums gently beneath everything. The kind that lets you hear the world breathing. You lie on your mat, wrapped in soft blankets, and beneath you, faithful as ever, the floor radiates warmth. Less now than before, but not gone, not forgotten. You press your hand flat to the stone, feeling the residue of the day's fire. It has traveled far, through narrow tunnels, around smooth clay corners, beneath the very bones of the house. It has done its work. And even now, hours later, it holds on, just enough to keep your dreams from catching cold. The scholar had said something earlier in passing, as he refolded a pillow. The Ondol teaches patience. You didn't ask what he meant at the time, but you understand now. Nothing about this kind of warmth is immediate. You must wait for the fire to move, wait for the smoke to travel, wait for the stones to remember. In a world where heat comes with a switch and noise and a digital beep, there's something almost radical about this quiet, patient kind of warmth. It's not just about fire, it's about rhythm. You think back through your day, the tea, the books, the meals on the floor, the long conversations held just inches above ancient stones. Every moment has been shaped by the Ondol's pace. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. And because of that, everything felt intentional. You remember walking across the room and knowing, this spot is warmer than that one. You remember how the family gathered naturally where the heat collected, how sleep came easier when your feet found the right patch of clay. You remember not being told what the house would do, but learning it, slowly, listening to it like an old friend who prefers to whisper. Historians sometimes debate whether this kind of architecture made people more introspective. Some say yes, that low sit-in, and quiet heat encourage contemplation. That when your home doesn't compete for attention, your mind can finally rest. Others argue that the effect is cultural, not architectural. But then again, where does one end and the other begin? You remember lying here earlier in the evening, tracing your finger across the floor's grain, wondering how many others had done the same. Children fidgeting before sleep. Grandmothers testing for warmth. Scholars sketching flue plans in their heads, right before dreaming of poems. You shift slightly now, pulling your blanket closer, and the floor answers. Still warm, still holding. You imagine the smoke, by now just a memory, settled into ash in the hearth, its journey complete. You imagine the stones beneath you, still giving off the slow, even breath of stored fire. And more than that, you imagine the centuries of people who have slept this way. Thousands of nights, thousands of rooms, all gently heated from below, all rooted in the same idea, that warmth doesn't need to be loud, that comfort doesn't require spectacle, that the ground beneath you can be more than solid, it can be kind. Even in war, even in poverty, even in the deepest cold of winter, the Ondol kept going, a quiet miracle tucked beneath the floor, never boasting, never asking for attention, just doing its work, just keeping you warm. You blink slowly, your eyelids heavier now. The stars above the roof tiles feel far away. Your breath has fallen into rhythm with the hush of the house, the breath of the sleeping scholar across the room, the last threads of heat rising into your spine. You stretch once, then still. The clay accepts you. And somewhere in the walls, a stone sighs. And now, dear listener, as your breath begins to soften and your body sinks deeper into stillness, let's take a moment to let go of the day. Let the images of the fire fade, the orange flicker, the slow smoked stones, the soft warmth rising through the floor. Let them drift away like the last curl of smoke from the chimney, dissolving into the cold night air. Let the scholar's voice fade too, that gentle cadence, the quiet humor, the stories passed down like tea, one cup at a time. His world remains there, behind the paper doors, folded into the sleeping hush of his family's home. And you? You are warm now, held. The floor beneath you has done its work. There's no need to move, no need to think. Just breathe in slowly, and breathe out. Feel the last threads of warmth wrap around your ankles, curl under your knees, hum softly beneath your back. You are low to the ground now, and that is not a small thing. It means you are close to the earth, to silence, to memory, to everything that came before. So go ahead. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let your thoughts grow lighter. Let the night deepen, and let the warmth carry you gently into sleep. Good night.